No, Rabbi, come sit over here. No, you don't stand today.
Okay. Morning. Whatever you do. Very good, very good. Okay. And welcome to town. Okay.
You know who it is, Rabbi?
No.
Noel Melul, our father.
Oh, beautiful.
Your son come to the class with us every day. Baruch Hashem, yes.
Okay, Mike's on. Okay, we're gonna
Yes.
get a look at Mike in. Okay, we are on 9B. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Sorry, we're running a little late. Okay.
No worries.
9B.
Thank you, Yaron Dahan, for setting it up, everything.
Okay. Are you comfortable, Yaron?
Yes,
Okay, we're on 9B. We're right before the wide lines. Up to Rabbi Yehuda. Now we're in the middle of a Gemara, because we're going to bring everybody into the Gemara. The Gemara has a question whether if a blind man kills somebody unintentionally. It seems to be unintentional. Does the blind man go to exile or not? For killing, Mike, we're on Tet of a base, 9B. We have three opinions in the Mishnah. One second, let's see. We had first we have two opinions in the Mishnah.
2 lines before the white line.
Yeah, 2 lines before the wide lines. 9B. The Gemara is focusing on, there's a machlok, the Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir in the Mishnah. If you look at the Mishnah, a little above that, a few lines above, you see the Mishnah, Hasuma Eina Goler. Mishnah says, Mike, you got it? On 9B, David, you got it? 9B? Hasuma Eina Goler. The first opinion in the Mishnah, what's your nephew's name? Josh. Hasuma Eina Goler. The first opinion says that the blind man does not go to Golut. Divrei Rebbe Yehuda. That's the opinion of Yehuda. Unintentional. By mistake. It seems right. By mistake. Exactly. Unintentional. Because if he killed intentionally, there's no Golut, there's no exile for intentional killing. You kill him, right? And if he's not warned, it's not enough of a kapara. Meaning to say, if a guy kills someone intentionally, no warning, no witnesses, you don't say go to exile, because exile is not enough. The punishment has to fit the crime. So therefore, in order to go ahead and get exile, it has to be a middle of a road type of crime. Meaning there are 3 categories. There's something called mezid, shogeg, and ones. If a person killed someone intentionally, he will not go to exile. Whether there's witnesses, no witnesses, exile is not enough of a kapara if you killed intentionally. If you killed and it was a total accident, you had nothing you could have done better, you also not go to exile. You don't deserve exile. Exile, you have to leave your house, with your family, and you have to go run to this place and stay there till the Kohen Gadol dies. If it was total beyond your control in any way, you will not go to exile. The case is the middle of the road case. We call it a shogeg. There was unintentional, but you could have done a little better. You could have done something, perhaps, you could have been a little more careful. A drunk driver, I would say, is negligent. A drunk driver will not go to exile because no, because because he was grossly negligent. No, you wouldn't kill him.
Why?
No, maybe if he'd be a non-Jew, he might be killed. A non-Jew, we might have certain laws for non-Jews in certain areas. They only have 7 mitzvot, and certain of those 7 mitzvot, they might be stricter in some of their mitzvot. That if he was negligent and the murder happened as well as negligence, maybe we would kill him for it. But a Jew, in order to kill a Jew, for killing another Jew, he has to have intent to murder. If you were negligent, he doesn't get. But sometimes what they would do is they would cause his death. The court sometimes they can't actually kill the guy, but let's say if a guy killed someone without witnesses, so then maybe they would do something or kill someone without a warning. But there were witnesses, they might put him down somewhere, give him some food to eat, and just let him die. Certain things they might do in order to only by they do this by a murderer they want to remove this type of thing from the Jewish community. Not a small amount of negligence, meaning a tiny bit of exile is unintentional, but there is a little bit of very small amount of negligence, meaning to say you could have done better. Then exile is not enough. So it depends on the type of case. Either God will punish the guy. God, no one gets off free. Josh, right? Nobody. Sure. What's your name? Whatever you want to be called. Nobody gets free. No one can get away with anything. Because if you get away from the court down here, then God will kill him upstairs. And that's a famous story of the Gemara is going to say. You have two people that killed. One guy killed someone intentionally, but there was no witnesses. And one guy killed someone unintentionally, and let's say it was also nobody knew about it. What does God do? So God takes these two people and he brings them to an inn, right? You're wrong. He brings them to an inn. They come to a hotel together. One guy goes up the ladder, and the guy who killed intentionally is on the bottom of the ladder. The guy who killed unintentionally is on the top of the ladder. He goes up the ladder, he falls down, he kills the guy who had killed intentionally. Therefore, his score is even. And now he had killed someone before unintentionally. Now that he did it in front of witnesses, he's going to go into what? Exile. So God will create the scenario that the guy who killed intentionally will get killed. Either he'll make him get killed, or there's other ways. God has many ways to punish someone. Death is not only considered actual death. There's other things are also considered death. It says a person blind is like assumed is like dead. Maybe he'll have sort of like the in many ways God could punish the person. Nobody can get away with anything. No one should ever feel in life that anybody gets away with anything. Judge of the court is very specific. For the court to make a judgment, and now we're going to see there's going to be a judgment about do we send the guy to exile? The court is going to have to make a judgment. Is this guy worthy of exile? Is the guy worthy of being free? He doesn't have to go to exile? Or this guy has to be murdered, killed. I said murdered. I don't want to call the court murder. We said murder. He has to be killed from the court. So those are the three possibilities of the court. And we're going to see in the Mishnah that everybody, after they killed someone, they will run to exile. Then the court will bring them back and then have a court case to decide where this guy belongs to be.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
how is it possible that someone killed someone and there is
The mic, excuse the pun, the mic went, we don't hear the mic. Yaron, what are we going to do? Yaron, we need your help. It's freezing over here. Yaron.
Rabbi, can you hear me?
Now I hear you. We lost
No.
you for a moment. Mike, we lost. Yes. Maybe we get him on the phone. Let me.
I wanted to ask you because you said there is the third case. Can you hear me, Rabbi?
I hear you, but it's getting chopped up a little bit. I'm going to ask one of the guys. What's Mike's number? Maybe it's better closer to over here.
Mike, can you hear?
Maybe it's my connection, Yaron. It's okay. It's pas grave.
Okay, we
Yeah,
hear
I
you
can hear
much
you.
better. We hear you much better now. Much better. Don't worry.
Mike, let me hear you talk.
Okay. Rabbi, the third case that somebody kills someone totally unintentionally, meaning he doesn't even go to the city of refuge. Right?
Right.
You said that's the case, right?
There's
so
one
even
case.
if he kills, he doesn't go. So what's an example for that? How is that? I always thought it's either he killed by purpose or unintentionally, but I didn't know there was another case.
That's why you come to learn today. That's why you learn a new thing. Ain't big midrash.
Can you hear me, Rabbi?
Yes, I hear you. But the answer
Yeah.
to that is,
So what's exactly? What's an example of that then?
Example would be if, let's say, you have a place an area that nobody ever goes to, a place that nobody ever goes to, and you're you're doing demolition, and you have a truck, and you throw all your big stones to that place, and it's a place that nobody goes to, and then someone walks into the place, and it says off limits. You put a red line tape, and nobody's allowed to go there. And someone walks in there and gets killed. You are not. You are. There's nothing that you could have done more. There's nothing you did in any way that you could have done better. You're going down a ladder and you fall on someone. So maybe you could have been a little more careful going down the ladder. So then therefore you'll be chayav galut if you went down the ladder and you fell on somebody. But in the case there was nothing more that you could have done, a guy walks into your property. You don't expect anyone to walk into your property, and you were doing gun practice, and a guy walks into your property, and you're not expecting anyone to walk in your property. He's trespassing. You know what I'm saying? That could be the type of case. I want to get Mike on the phone in case he ever.
Rabbi, I can hear perfect. I'm good. I hear perfectly.
You hear perfectly? Okay, very good.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Now. So that background. So what time should we learn till today? I want to know what time works for the guys. Till what time should we go today? You make the call. It's now 9:14.
9:45.
9:45 sounds good. By the way, this is also, even though we have some people from Iran over here, this is not Iran. We do not hold hostages.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. So anytime you want to leave, you need to leave.
Okay.
You're able to. Don't feel that you have to stay to the end. And I don't feel insulted if you have to leave. I rather a person comes to the class for any amount of time than not come at all. That's my personal preference. But I'm just saying, I don't know what your schedules are. Maybe you have to meet the president. You know what I mean? I can't tell you where the former president's waiting for you, in Trump Towers. I can't tell you, David. You know what I mean? Okay. So the Gemara said, so we have that machloket. One opinion says a sumah, a blind man does not go to exile. And that's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir says golet. Rabbi Meir says a blind man goes to golut. If he kills someone unintentionally, he goes to golut. And the Gemara explained that they're arguing from the psukim. Their basis for the argument is how to understand the psukim. Because the pasuk says, somebody killed somebody unintentionally below ra'ot. He didn't see the man. What does it seem to imply? He didn't see him. Who are we talking about? A person who has the capability of seeing? A person who doesn't have the capability of seeing. So the Gemara understands, if you tell me he didn't see him, sounds like he's a person who has vision, he has ability to see, but he couldn't see. He didn't see this guy. But the pasuk is not talking about a guy who has no ability to see at all. If you tell me, by the way, you know what happened in this case? He wasn't able to see him. He didn't see him. What does it sound like? What type of guy we're talking about? A guy blind or not a guy blind? Because the difference is, if a guy who's blind kills someone, is the Torah excluding a blind man from going to exile? When the Torah says a person who kills someone unintentionally goes to exile, how do we understand what's the law by a blind man? Would we say a blind man is just like everybody else? Now we said by when it comes to mitzvot, generally a blind man is obligated to mitzvot. We don't say because a person's blind, he is allowed to eat not kosher food, right? We don't say because a person's blind that he's not obligated to mitzvot. But what about this? Now why should this be different? So the question is, would you understand? I mean, first we have to see from the pasuk's point of view. Is the pasuk telling us? Is the pasuk indicating something to us? So, and also there's an idea that somebody that maybe if someone's blind, would you look at it more of an ones? Would you look at it more of that lower level? That it's something that's not so that you would say there's not really negligence there, or would you look at it that maybe there is too much negligence because you should have been more careful because you're blind? So what is the pasuk? Therefore, there's reason to understand that if the pasuk is telling us a certain case, maybe the case of the Torah is excluding a blind man. So if we understand that the case of the Torah was he didn't see the guy, sounds like he had the ability to see. So that's and then the Gemara said, then there's another pasuk. The pasuk says that the murder was done believe that without knowledge. So the Gemara understood, Ramey understood that means to tell us that there was no intent. You didn't know the guy was there, which seems to indicate you generally have the ability to know that the guy was there, but in this circumstance, you didn't know he was there. So what type of person are we talking about? So again, it seems to be talking about a person who has the ability to see. If I tell you, if the Torah says, I want to have somebody goes ahead and he kills somebody without knowledge, means he is a person who has knowledge. Yes, David.
And then let's say you have a guy behind the tree.
Talk louder because Mike wants to hear you.
Let's say you have a guy behind the tree.
Right.
And it's impossible for any human being on earth to see that there's a guy behind that tree.
Right.
No one's gonna know.
Right.
Okay, it's a big enough tree, you can't tell.
Right.
You're in the range, you're shooting arrows, you're in target practice, and somehow the arrow goes and it hits the guy behind the tree.
Right.
Now, whether you're blind or whether you have vision, nobody could see that guy. So
nobody will go to exile in that case. I want to talk about the case of the blind man going down the ladder. Let's go down the ladder. And he falls down off the ladder and he kills somebody. That's the classic case that a person will go to exile. A regular, healthy person with vision will go to exile, right, Yaron?
he goes up.
No, it goes up and he falls, no. So the Gemara makes, because there's a difference. So some say there's more, right? The Pasuk talks about the case who's going down the ladder, not going up. So some of the commentators try to explain what's the difference going up and going down. So some say going down where the gravity is pulling you down, there's a level of negligence that you're going to be more careful. But going up, that's the Rambam. That's what the Rambam explains. How do you like that, David? Fascinating, right? You never thought of it. That's why you have, David, that's why you have to come. David, that's why you got to come to the class, David, right? Am I right? Josh, you got to tell your uncle. You meet him at the class. Wait, Washington, the time is different? Oh, you're in LA these days. Ah. Okay, we spoke about responsibility before. Okay. So that's the idea. So now we have another pasuk that tells us that he didn't know. So it sounds like the case of the Torah, you see, is talking about a case of a person who generally has the ability to know somebody's there. But in this situation, that happened. He didn't know the guy was there. So what type of person is the Torah talking about? What's the case of the Torah? The case of the Torah is someone who has vision. He didn't see the guy. Generally, he would have seen the guy. Implying a blind person who generally will never have that, will never see the guy. That's not the case of the Torah. So now, when Meir has a ruling, there's something called when the Torah is a double miut. Mi'at, miut, acha miut, ein el rabot. What is that concept? If the Torah tells us two exclusions, excluding the case, twice the Torah repeats itself, then it's not coming to exclude. Let's explain. The Torah wants to exclude a blind man. How would the Torah do it, Yaron? It would tell us once. God doesn't have to repeat himself, right? He'll tell us once. Tell us a case. He'll talk about a case which is specific to someone who has vision, which will exclude someone who doesn't have vision. Correct? If I tell you if the Torah goes out of its way to tell us that the case is somebody didn't see the guy, implying that he generally has the ability to see, but he didn't see this guy, that would exclude someone who never had the ability to see. Okay? If you tell me once, and that will teach us the lesson. But if the Torah goes again and it repeats itself, something about which would seem to indicate to exclude a guy that doesn't see, would you need to exclude the guy twice? You need to exclude a guy once. If you want to exclude the case of someone who doesn't have vision, how many times would you have to exclude him? Once is enough. If you're interested in excluding him, you would tell us how many times? Once. But the fact that you tell me something twice, which seems to indicate you're excluding him twice, it's clear you're not coming to exclude him. You're not coming to exclude. So therefore, the Torah is clearly not coming to exclude. So therefore, don't interpret he didn't see, but if he generally does see, it's talking about a person who generally sees, but a person who doesn't see at all is excluded. No, The case is he didn't see, and so too the law would be if someone also doesn't see it, never see it. Bibli that he didn't know. He didn't know the guy was there because he didn't see it. But also, even if he would have, even if he never had vision, the Torah is not talking specifically. We're not coming to exclude a blind man. That's Rameir. How does Rameir know we're not coming to exclude a blind man? Because the Torah writes it twice, and if it's interested in excluding, it will be only written once. David, you got it? Comes along Rabbi Yehuda, with me, Ariel. You see, if you want to exclude something, if you want to tell me, if you want to be specific, if you want to say, sometimes people talk very specific, right? When you do contracts, right? You do a thing, every word is very specific. You come in to mean this and not that, right? Who's responsible? You're responsible for this. The landlord is responsible for this, A, B, C, D, but he doesn't list something else. Why? Because you're not responsible for anything else. The contract said it's a net lease. The landlord, this A, B, C, D. That's it. Everything else is I hear you.
There's two ways of looking at it. It's the exact same example as
Talk louder. Mike wants to hear your holy voice out here.
same. We can see it two different ways. The same example as when we in message at the back.
Louder, Rabbi. I cannot hear Ariel.
So I was saying it's the same example when we studied the Ateva Shel Gedi Bechalev Imo. We said it 3 times in the Torah, right?
Right.
To give
Each
three
time it's telling 3 different laws.
two different. We can also see it here that it was says 2 times, so that it means for both people who just they couldn't see it at this time, or for people who are blind.
So we wouldn't need 2 psukim. Yeah, because because each pasuk tells us a new thing that was not known from the previous pasuk. But these 2, a guy who was able to see, we don't even need these 2 psukim. We know from the other. He comes into the forest. The normal case is the person's able to see. So therefore, you have 2 psukim telling us about the blind man. So therefore, you have 2 psukim which seems to exclude him. So obviously, it's not coming to exclude him, because if you come to exclude him, you only need one pasuk to exclude him. One extra pasuk.
Rabbi, you have to say what the Gemara is calling a blind man. The Gemara is not calling a blind man someone who cannot see at all. A blind man, meaning the one who didn't see where he was shooting, or didn't see what he was doing.
Right, but
this is what the Gemara say blind. Someone is blind is someone who didn't see during the act what he was doing.
Yaron,
And we call this guy a blind man.
Yes, that's not what the Mishnah, when the Mishnah talks about a blind man, the Mishnah means a blind man physically. The case of the Torah was he didn't see the guy, but nobody was blind. You might look at him like a blind because he didn't see the guy, but nobody is blind. So the question here is someone who is physically Rahmana Litzlan blind. Yitzchak Avinu, before his death, he was pretty much blind. He couldn't see. He couldn't recognize. He could be Esav in front of him. It could be Yaakov. He can't see. He's called blind. That's blind. But the case of the Torah, when the guy killed the person, the case of the Torah was nobody was blind. He didn't see the guy. He's not blind. We want to know, what about a blind man? What the law would be by a blind man? That's the question of the Mishnah. Because the
machloket is based on the sentence. So we're going to send him to exile. We're not going to send him to exile, right?
Right. But
so one you say we send him to exile, and one you say is fully honest.
Again, it's based on how do you understand the pasuk? We could try to explain the reason behind the pasuk.
No, but
the question is, what is the Mishnah? The Gemara now says that the argument in the Mishnah is based on how do you understand the pasuk? Is the pasuk coming to exclude a blind man? Meaning the Gemara says everybody agrees. The case of the Torah, when the Torah talks about going to exile, the case of the Torah was the person who killed the other person had vision. He had 20/20 vision, whatever his vision, 20/40, 20, whatever it was. He had a good vision. That's the case of the Torah. He had vision, but he didn't see this guy. But he had perfect vision.
And they call him how?
What do you say?
They call him what? This guy?
And they say he didn't see the guy. He didn't see the guy coming. He didn't see him. Now, but we said he could have done a little better. Right? Remember, we had the case in the Gemara that there's a garbage dump that people generally don't go there during the day. But once in a while, a person goes during the day. So he wasn't really, and then he's throwing out he's doing demolition and he's throwing his stones to the garbage dump. So generally, people don't come. So it's not grossly negligent. But on occasion, once in a while, once in a blue moon or a white moon, once in a blue moon, the guy comes. So therefore, he could have done a little better. He should have realized, maybe he should have checked a little bit. Maybe a guy came. That's the case. He didn't see the guy. But the guy who killed him, who didn't see him, has vision, has the ability to see. And the Torah goes out of its way to tell us that he didn't see the guy, which indicates he generally has the ability to see. But a person who doesn't have the ability to see at all, maybe he will not have, he won't be subject to these laws. Maybe he won't be such a, that's the question. Now, Rabbi Yehuda, what does Rabbi Yehuda say? He says we exclude a blind man. But the question is, but don't we have two? If you have two exclusions, we should say it's clearly not coming to exclude. If the Torah is being specific twice, you have to say it's not coming to exclude. It really meant to exclude, it would have just said it once. So the Gemara says of Yehuda, bivlidat prat lemeschavenu da'ata. What does Yehuda say? Listen to this case. A guy was intending to shoot an animal, kill an animal, but there was a person right nearby. Or a guy was intending to shoot an animal, and he thought it was an animal, but it was really a person. From a distance, it looked like an animal, but really it was what? A person. It happens in hunting, right? People hunt. People go hunting. There's hunting accidents. The lawyers make a big, So very good. So that's the case of negligence. Even though, so that's the case that you unintentionally killed a person.
Yeah.
You did not intend to kill a person, but you should have been more careful. You should have looked closer. You should have shot from such a distance. It looks like an animal. Maybe it's a person. So that's the case. The Torah is excluding exile. But believe that, you didn't know
That's the case is excluding
that he does not go to exile. That type of case, because why he doesn't go to exile? Because exile is not enough of an atonement.
It's not enough of a punishment.
Not enough of a punishment. Murdering someone, being negligent and murdering someone, going to exile is not enough.
He's not gonna kill the guy.
We're not going to kill the guy, but he's. I told you, David is not free. God's not going to let him free. But practically, meaning, right? It looks like he's free. And the court can't.
It's either like that guy who should have been more careful and killed someone goes free. What's the deterrent factor? The next guy comes along, he sees that guy like, oh, the guy killed someone by accident. I'm gonna take my gun hunting. And if I kill someone, I'm gonna go
Okay,
free.
so the question is there anything that the court? Because the Rambam says about murder. It's a very fascinating Rambam. Let's get this Rambam out about murder. Mayonot, you learn a lot of Rambam, right?
And target.
We know about the Rambam. They're very much focusing on the Rambam a lot. He says something very fascinating. You're going to be blown away. Let's see if we'll find it. Yeah. He talks about when the court doesn't have the ability to kill, what they do. What is your what? Wow, Shalom Aleichem. Welcome. Make yourself comfortable. Let's see. Perek Hey Halacha Gimel Dalet. There's a Rambam that says that murder is unique, that someone who kills someone intentionally, they wasn't warned, a type of case like that. Let's say, we have to see which other cases. The Rambam says certain cases that the guy killed intentionally and he wasn't warned. In general, a guy was Mechala Shabbat and he wasn't warned. We're not going to might not bring about his death. But a person who murdered someone and not being warned, and there's witnesses, and he intentionally murdered someone, we're going to do certain things to make sure that that guy gets killed. So, but I don't know if they're going to go ahead and do it for this type of level, because it was negligent, but it wasn't intentionally. And the guy shot, he thought he was shooting an animal, and he shot a person. So we said that if a guy shoots a person instead of an animal, he kills the person. So we said, the court doesn't kill him because he didn't intend to kill a person. But he doesn't go to exile because exile is not enough of a punishment. Aaron Miklev is not enough of a punishment because this is too much. There's too much negligence to go to. So now the question is, what do we do with such a person? So we have to see.
Chopping the tree and then the axe flies.
Right, because there that was less negligence. There was a very small amount of negligence. Maybe he could have checked the axe a little better, maybe to make sure that the iron was stronger. But that's really an unintentional case. The middle of the road. What? More ones, but it's not 100% ones, because maybe, hey, there was someone nearby. It's possible that the axe.
So that guy goes to exile?
That guy goes there. There's two opinions in Mishnah what the case is. Either the axe head, the iron goes flying, and hits the guy and kills the guy. So that guy goes to exile. That according to the Chachamim, Rabbi says no, he doesn't go to exile in that case. He says only when a chip of wood came off the tree and went flying, hit the guy and killed him. But the Chachamim say no. The case that he goes to exile is when the axe head, when the iron of the axe went flying. I feel bad I'm having difficulty finding that Rambam. If I can find it, there's a very eloquent Rambam about when a person kills someone and how the court causes death sometimes. Maybe next time we meet, I'll spend the time looking at find it. But I don't want to take the time looking at that Rambam. Okay, but nobody even if nobody gets away with anything. Even if the court doesn't have the ability, and that's something we need to remember. Let's say that certain sins get kareh, right? So you're going to tell me a guy goes ahead and he eats on Yom Kippur. So what are you going to tell me, David? The court down here doesn't kill him. Maybe they give him lashes. If he was warned and there's witnesses, he gets lashes. Or if a guy murders someone without a warning, or whatever, I'm saying. Well, many things that people do, very rarely, you see, it's interesting, very rarely did we ever kill anybody. The Mishnah says that for a court to kill someone every 7 years, and some say every 70 years, some opinions say that's a murderous court. So very rarely we actually did capital punishment. There's a letter of Moshe Feinstein to Governor Hugh Carey. Governor, the Carey tunnel, there was a governor of New York, 1981, his name was Hugh Carey. Okay, he wanted to know what's the Jewish opinion on capital punishment. Okay, so obviously when he says his advisors or whatever said, you want to know the traditional opinion, the Orthodox opinion, you got to go to Rabbi Feinstein. So they had someone ask Rabbi Feinstein, Moshe Feinstein, what is the opinion of Jewish opinion, the authentic or traditional opinion on capital punishment? So Moshe Feinstein pens a letter to Governor Hugh Carey, and he gives him a bracha, a blessing, and at the end of the letter. And in the letter, he says, very rarely we killed anybody. How often do we kill somebody? You need to be warned. You have witnesses. We have certain, but he says, very rarely did a Jew kill. Because the fact that the Torah gives such a punishment for such a sin, that in itself, people recognize the seriousness of the sin. By having on the books, so to speak, I don't want to call it on the books, but on the Torah, written in the Holy Torah, that this law of capital punishment, the people recognize how serious the sin is. And as a result of that, they refrain from doing the sin.
Everybody has consequences in books. Everybody knows.
I'm saying that if the Torah, the fact that there is something called capital punishment, if the Torah would not have given the punishment called capital punishment, I understand, right? But Moshe wants to say that even though it's very rare that we did it, but we have such a thing called capital punishment. There is such a law, and Moshe writes, I think sometimes if murder would get out of hand, then sometimes the courts would go out of their way to mete out capital punishment in such cases. Let's say we had a situation, the seventh son of Sam. Right, a guy he would see blonde-haired girls and he would kill them. That was a guy in the. I visited someone in the jail that he was there. I saw him. Not Jewish, right? He was.
He pretend he was.
I think he was adopted or something. I think they said a great rabbi said he can't be a Jew wouldn't do such a thing. There was a guy. His name was David Berkowitz. But he was in the 1970s. The city was very scared because there's a guy killing people. This Central Park, maybe I don't know. We see blonde women, he would kill them. There was a guy going around killing people.
He wasn't Jewish.
He wasn't Jewish. So a big rabbi said he can't be Jewish. Such a person wouldn't be Jewish. And they subsequently found out he wasn't. Maybe he was I don't know what the story was. But the bottom line is, generally speaking, we don't need to have the capital punishment to create a deterrent, and therefore, and even if there are many cases that the Gemara is going to say, we're not going to kill the guy because of from a technical loopholes, whatever. We're looking to save the guy, but nevertheless, he's not going to get away with it.
Because what you said that no one ever gets away. The case of the axe, which is much more indirect, in the case of guys shooting an animal and shooting a person, it's like a bracha that he does exile because that's it. That's his punishment.
Exactly. That's the kapara. That's what the Gemara. Right. Exactly. He's in a bad spot.
All the time. What's my tikkun?
No, but
Right.
the family you can come after.
And the family.
That's why if they don't go, the family can come in and kill him.
So the situation where the guy shoots the guy, but it's an animal, the family of
That I'm not
the
sure.
guy-
I don't know. I have to look it up. That I'm not sure in that case. In that case, when it was negligent, I don't know if the family has the right to kill him in such a case.
Is everything measured against nature. So the one that the axe flew per se and hit that other person and killed him, was it in a prior Gilgul or whatever they might have been? There would be something that in this lifetime, this equates for. That's why the whole concept of that punishment, the capital punishment, is so rare because very rarely a life is taken away. It's not from purpose for a full, but rather another as severe as possible, but less than the level of taking the life of someone.
Because he was the servant of dying. That's your point. Because of whatever. But on the other hand, the person who is the shliach, who volunteers for the job to kill the person, that's what God is wants is punishing for you. I mean, let's say it's meant to be that person should get killed, but that you should be the one that it happened through. That's what because you made the decision to you volunteered for the job to kill the guy, and no one told you to volunteer to kill the guy. That's why you had a choice not to be. Paro had a choice not to be the one to punish the Jewish people. God could have punished Jewish people in other ways, but you make that decision to punish the Jewish people. You're going to get punished for it. Also, I think it's brought down. The guy, a person, if murder, even if a person is an ones, a person who, something that wasn't his control, and therefore he's not going to go to exile, he still has to ask himself, Death was brought out through himself, through his actions. Even if he wasn't negligent, I would think that he needs to ask himself, look inside and do an introspection. Why was I, like there's something called Megalgal in Zechut Ayde Zakai. Megang Echov Ayde Chayav. Good things happen through good people. People help a person, make a shidduch, or whatever it is. The good people are merit to do, a lot of times merit to do great things. To be the messenger for the Jewish community. Hopefully David was one of those type of guys. But
so you want to be around him, so you get that.
hopefully he brings blessings, so you connect to it. But then there's something called chovai de chayav. Bad things happen through bad people. And our job is always to make sure that we are the zakai to bring those good things. So if someone, let's say, was in a car accident and he killed somebody, totally unintentionally, and there was no negligence, let's say whatever the case was, the guy ran in front of the car. There's no negligence over there. Guy runs in front of the car, you're going 50 miles an hour, and the guy runs in front of the car. I don't think that's the case. That's something that you could have done better. But still, at the end of the day, a person asks himself, why did it happen? Why was I the one who caused it? That's what I would say.
So Rabbi, basically the blind and the one who kills someone without knowing what he was shooting, right? He's not going to go to exile. It's not enough. Exile is not good for him. Mezid is not mezid, but he's in between. So he's not going to go to exile. So the same case for the blind.
So there's two opinions in the blind. How do you understand the blind man? Is a blind man who kills unintentionally a little more negligent, or is a blind man more accidental? Because of his vision, do we say because he's blind, he should have been more careful? He should have asked more because maybe there's someone there he didn't see? Or do we say because he's blind, maybe the people around him maybe should be more, should know to stay away, or maybe he's not considered as responsible. So a blind man,
but what I want to say, regardless, he's not going to go to exile.
He's not going to go to exile, but there is a question is, what's the reason why? See, Rabbi Yehuda says a blind man, he considers a blind man like an ones, like it's beyond his control. In a certain sense, some explain that the reason why the blind man won't go to exile, because he couldn't see, there was some sort of, can't hold him responsible. A person who's able to see and unintentionally kill someone, he's more responsible than someone who's not able to see. Right? The guy is not able to see. He's not able to see. He's handicapped. So that's how some explain the reason behind the guy who was unable to see. If he kills somebody unintentionally, he doesn't have to go to exile, is because he's off the hook. Because because he's handicapped, and his handicap is his vision, he's not held as responsible as someone who has the ability to see. Is that clear, Yaron, or not? Yeah. Okay, we should be zocher. Everyone should always be able to see the right things in life, see the beauty of the good in people.
Amen.
Always the proper vision to do the kafschut, give the benefit of the doubt to your fellow Jew.
Amen.
And hopefully that will be have the right vision. Put on the right glasses, everybody.
Il est là.
Why does it hang hara? Why does it hang?
Enjoy beautiful day.
Yaron, ici à Tova.
Merci frérot, je t'embrasse, kiffez bien. Embrasse tout le monde.
Hein?
Embrasse tout le
monde. Je t'embrasse, tiens. Bisous à ton Yaron. Fais ton bisou à ton cousin Yaron.
Bye.